Massachusetts is one of the oldest states in the nation and has a native history that stretches back thousands of years. It is also home to Salem, where the mass hysteria infested the little town and the famous Salem witch trials took place. Today, we will explore 10 of the many shiver-inducing urban legends the old colony state has to offer. The Bridgewater Triangle is about 200 square miles in the southeastern Massachusetts area. Since colonial times, the area has been the site of alleged paranormal phenomena ranging from UFOs and mysterious black helicopter sightings to poltergeist and orbs, balls of fire, various Bigfoot sightings, giant snakes, and thunderbirds, as well as the mutilation of cattle and other livestock. Known for centuries as an area of unusual and unexplained activity, the Triangle encompasses the towns of Abington, Brockton, Rehoboth, and Freetown as the points, and inside the Triangle, Norton, Bridgewater, West Bridgewater, Middleborough, Dogtown, Berkeley, Raham, Easton, Lakeville, and Talton. Central to the area is the most mysterious, untouched Hoosac Swamp. The names were given to the swamp by the native tribe in the area, and they mean the place where spirits dwell, and also called the Devil's Swamp by the early settlers. The Triangle contains several Indian burial grounds. According to one tale, the Native Americans cursed the swamp centuries ago because of the poor treatment they received from the settlers. Found within the boundaries of the Bridgewater Triangle is the Dogtown Rock, a source of great controversy. The rock contains several inscriptions by the possible pre-Columbian visitors, ranging from Vikings and Portuguese to the Phoenicians. Freetown Fall River State Forest is another area within the Triangle with unusual activity. The forest land was bought from the Wampanoag tribe in 1659, and the Native Americans claim that odd and evil events happened over the next 350 years as a result of a tribe curse. For decades, the state forest has been the site of various cult activity, including animal sacrifices, ritualistic murders committed by admitted Satanists, as well as gang murders and a high number of suicides. There have been over 300 years of UFO sightings in the Bridgewater Triangle as well as the forest. The first recorded report in 1796 describes the UFO as a sphere of fire that casts shadows in broad daylight. There have also been several reported sightings of a Bigfoot-like creature in the Hoosac Swamp. In 1978, a man reported seeing a half-man, half-ape creature entering the swamp. Another resident reported that while he was out canoeing, he saw a large hairy beast in the swamp river. Sometime in the 1970s, the creature was reported to have picked up the rear end of a police car while the officers were inside. Locals refer to this creature as the Hoosac Swamp Monster. For years, there have also been reports of giant birds or pterodactyl-like flying creatures with wingspans of 8 to 12 feet seen in the Hoosac Swamp and neighboring Talton. There have also been many reports of unusual animals dating back to pre-colonial times, with the recent reports from government and other officials that include alligators, black panthers, giant turtles, and a giant snake as thick as a tree trunk. In 1976, an Abington resident reported a phantom dog with red eyes attacking ponies. The dog was said to be as big as the ponies. One police officer tried to stop the beast from ripping the ponies' throats out by firing his weapon, but it did not affect the beast. One of the most common reports of the area is spook lights or will-o-wisp, also known as ghost lights. Mysterious lights also appear along the train tracks every January, and foxfire has often been seen within the swamp. There are also many reports of animal mutilation, mostly in the Freetown Fall River areas, that police believe to be the work of a cult. Two more recent reports in 1998 say one in which a single cow was found butchered in the woods, the other where a group of calves were found in a clearing, mutilated as part of a ritual sacrifice. There have also been dozens of confirmed murders in the forest, and another disturbing discovery by police following a report of sexual assault was an underground bunker hidden from view. When they investigated, police found many strange objects, including small chairs with belts or restraints that seemed to have been made for children. When archaeologists excavated a burial ground on the grassy island of Hoosac Swamp and opened the graves, the red ochre in the tombs bubbled up and dissolved. Also, the photos taken at the site would not develop. The Freetown Fall River State Park in the Triangle has been the site of several gruesome murders linked to admitted Satanists or otherwise consistent with satanic rituals. Local graves have also been disturbed with skulls stolen that were later found in the forest. Since the 1980s, there have also been many reports of sacrificed cattle and goats. In the Rehoboth area in June of 2002, there were reports of strange black helicopters. Residents claim the helicopters had spotlights and have been seen flying over Palmer Reiser School. A local farmer reported 2 black helicopters with spotlights flying in formation over the trees. The choppers came from the southeast. Another report in July of 2002 described it as a gray camouflage or striped helicopter. Other reports from the Hoosac Swamp include the smell of smoke when there is no fire, a bonfire on top of a rock that mysteriously disappears, and the disembodied voices of the Algonquin tongue. Oh, and we can't forget the Phantom 44 hitchhiker. Many have reported this specter of a long-dead hitchhiker along the wooded area of Route 44. The man is sometimes well kept, but other times his clothes are dirty. But a few of the details remain consistent in all encounters. His hair is always red, and he wears a plaid shirt. One woman reported running over the man that fit that description late one night. When she got out of her car to check, there was no one there. But she did hear the cackling laugh coming from the woods. Scared, the woman got back in her car and left. But a few minutes later, the man again suddenly appeared, and she could not stop in time. Too scared to leave her car this time, she rolled down her window to check. But again, there were no signs of the man, just the disturbing laugh. This time, much closer. The woman sped out of there as fast as she could. Anyone interested in unsolved crimes and brave enough to risk an encounter with the supernatural, the Lizzie Borden house is the ideal destination. Fall River, Massachusetts was once the crown jewel of the textile industry in the United States that thrived during the 19th century, but achieved lasting notoriety as the setting of one of the most gruesome, unsolved double murders in American history, the Borden murders. The morning of August 4th, 1892, started like every other day for the Borden family of Fall River. But by noon, everything changed. Andrew Borden, the family patriarch, was brutally murdered while napping on the settee in the sitting room, and his wife Abby butchered in the guest room. Before the murders, Andrew and Abby were living in the Greek Revival house with Andrew's grown daughters Emma and Lizzie and their maid Bridget Sullivan. With Emma out of town visiting friends, only Lizzie and the maid remained at home at the time of the murders. Bridget was outside washing windows and was quickly ruled out as a suspect leaving Lizzie as the prime suspect. Her known dislike for her stepmother and ever-changing alibis troubled authorities, but Lizzie kept insisting she was innocent, saying it must have been an intruder. During further investigation, a newly broken hatchet was found in the cellar, and Lizzie was quickly charged. With no conclusive proof the found hatchet was the murder weapon, an eyewitness testimony claiming to have seen Lizzie burning a dress that may or may not have been worn the day of the murders, there was not enough evidence to convince the jury that Lizzie Borden was guilty, as she was acquitted, but the suspicion continued to follow her. The Borden murders remain unsolved today. The story of the murders became a tale that has been passed down through generations through nursery rhymes, movies, and word of mouth. Employees and guests of the Lizzie Borden house have experienced fire alarms going off at 3 a.m., the feeling of being sick or watched, apparitions, and disembodied voices. Lizzie Borden took an axe and gave her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41. Andrew Borden now is dead. Lizzie hit him on the head. Up in heaven he will sing, in the gallows she will swing. There are many haunted places in Massachusetts, but the Hoosac Tunnel is considered the most popular for ghost activity. Around 1819, a tunnel canal was proposed, but soon as the steam locomotive was introduced, the plans quickly changed from a tunnel canal to a railroad tunnel. In 1851, the local railroad company named Troy and Greenfield finally started the construction. It took about $22 million and 24 years to complete. The reason it took so long was that the original project had to be stopped and started over in a new location, just to the right of the original hole. Eventually, they started using nitroglycerin to blast a hole for the tunnel. Although successful, dozens of men were killed. Over time, these men would not be the only ones to lose their lives here. Approximately 200 men met their fate in the construction by different means, including fire, nitroglycerin explosions, and even through the means of another's hands. Because of all the deaths, the locals began to call the tunnel the Bloody Pit. In 1865, 3 men set out to use nitroglycerin to complete the project. One man, Ringo Kelly, set off the explosive before the other 2 made it back to the safety point. After that, Kelly disappeared. 1 year and 10 days later, Kelly's body was found strangled where the initial 2 bodies were found. Locals and crew members began to believe that the spirits of the 2 men killed Kelly, and that's when the legends began. In September of 1868, a group of soldiers heard the sound of a man crying out in what seemed like agony. When they investigated the sound, they said it was coming from the exact location of the other murders. In October of that same year, a gas line broke and destroyed a station that pumped water, killing 13 miners. Shortly afterwards, locals reported seeing apparitions of the miners lingering in the mist at the top of the mountain. When investigated, there were no footprints or any other indications that someone living had been there, much less a large group all at once. The Hoosac Tunnel is reported to have several spirits. Many people claim to see the apparitions, strange lights, among other unexplained phenomena. One person has even claimed to have been beaten by his own rifle by the hands of a spirit. There have also been several reports that people have entered the woods surrounding the tunnels, never to be seen again. Salem's most infamous historic haunted house looms grimly above Washington Street. Visitors on tours and townspeople pass by it every day, mostly unaware of the horrors that lurk inside. Some of Salem's residents know the history about the land's former owner, but most walk by unaware. Those who do know shudder when they pass at night. The Joshua Ward House sits on the land that was owned by the witch trial's High Sheriff, George Corwin. Legends say that he used his private home as a sadistic torture dungeon for the innocent victims of the trials. People he believed were witches or warlocks received death sentences, that is, if they survived the dungeon interrogations. He ordered the executions of 19 men and women, commanding that they either be slowly strangled or crushed to death with large rocks. In addition to Corwin's sadistic spirit stalking the house, the Joshua Ward House is also haunted by an executed warlock and witch that causes the lights to flicker, doors to open then slam shut, random gusts of wind, overturned trash cans, and melted down unlit candles. The Mordecai Lincoln Homestead was built by President Lincoln's great-great-great-grandfather in 1691. According to legends, a young girl drowned in the pond across the street and has now taken up residency in the old mill. Locals reported to have seen a little girl scratching at the windows, as well as screams from the barn and the surrounding wetlands. Little wet footprints have also been seen on the road in front of the building. The barn has largely remained run down until recently. Teens trying to be amateur ghost hunters frequent the homestead looking for spirits, but psychic mediums warn there is something much more sinister in the barn and possesses a greater risk than a simple scare, but that has not stopped them. Dogtown is a ghost town on Cape Ann that was established in 1693 by about 80 families looking to escape pirate and Native American attacks, which plagued other parts of the area. When the threat of pirates disappeared, most families abandoned their small homes and resettled along the harbor. The now mostly empty village, formerly known as the Commons, or the Commons Settlement, quickly began to attract outcasts and drifters who squatted in the empty homes. It was during this time the abandoned town got a new name, Dogtown, either from the many dogs the villagers used for protection or because of the new low-level inhabitants it attracted. Some of the known women inhabitants were Luce George, Molly Stevens, Judy Rhines, Peg Wasson, Thomasine or Tammy Younger, and Molly Jacobs. These women had long been suspected of witchcraft. Thomasine Tammy Younger was known as the Queen of Witches and lived in a little house on Fox Hill where she was said to have entertained buccaneers and lawless men, made rum and butter, held card games, and read fortunes. According to legend, she also bewitched oxen carrying supplies over the bridge near her house, commanding them not to move until the owners paid her toll. Legends say that Tammy's aunt, Luce George, as well as Peg Watson, would curse the piles of wood on passing carts to not stay on the carts unless some of the wood was given to them. Peg Wasson was also accused of flying a broomstick and one day did so dressed as a black crow. She flew over a camp of soldiers who shot the crow down with a silver button fired from a gun after regular bullets failed. According to legends, at the same time the bird was shot, Peg fell at home and injured her leg. Upon examination, the doctor extracted an identical silver button. By 1839, the witches of Dogtown and the other inhabitants eventually died, moved away, or were placed in poorhouses. The abandoned village was later turned into a park. Many people attribute the large number of lost hikers in Dogtown to the witch's evil power. Some have reported to hear an evil cackle coming from the woods. In 1984, a Boston resident claimed he saw a gigantic animal roaming the cliffs near Dogtown and thought it was a mountain lion, but wildlife officials insist there are no mountain lions on Cape Ann. March 17, 1984 was a full moon, and by March 21, 1984, a dead deer was found on Cranes Beach. It had been torn apart, but not eaten. That same night, 2 people reported seeing a gray, monstrous dog animal running into the woods. If that wasn't creepy enough, how about a toy cemetery? Sometime in the past few years, old dolls and stuffed animals began appearing in a section of Dogtown. Tied-up baby dolls and grim-looking animals are prominently featured in the collection. One of the most eerily baffling tales from the dark side of the Bay State history is sure to leave you with a serious case of chills. According to the Quanahostas tribe, there is a demon called the Hobomok that inhabits the granite ledges outside the Boston Light in Cohastas, Massachusetts. The rocks are famous for destroying ship hulls and claiming lives. The Quanahostas tribe believe the demon caused the great gales to well up along the coast and curse anyone who dared approach its domain. The lighthouse was built in 1783 to help prevent ships from wrecking against the sharp rocks and hazardous shores of the Boston Harbor, but the picturesque lighthouse also has an exceptionally haunted history. George Worthy Lake, the first lighthouse keeper, is reported to have drowned in the water just off the lighthouse when his boat capsized in what appeared to be calm waters. Along with George that day was his wife and infant child, who also drowned. Tragedy struck again with the second lighthouse keeper, Robert Sanders, who had only been on the job for a few days and mysteriously drowned. The Boston Light had been back in service a little more than a year when the next keeper left his 2 assistants in charge on April 11, 1851. While he was gone, a strange gale moved up from the northeast, preventing his return on April 16th of 1851. The people on the mainland were awoken to nonstop ringing from the fog belt. The next morning, the building was gone. One assistant was found washed up on Gull Rock Island shore, the other on Nantucket. Hobomok had struck again. The ghosts of the doomed lighthouse keepers are said to roam the waters around the lighthouse, sometimes appearing as waving arms in the breaking surface of the surf, and even appearing to visitors inside the lighthouse itself. Danvers State Mental Hospital was built in the 1880s. The hospital was only meant to hold 600 patients, but ended up housing over 2,300. The living conditions were horrific, as were the treatment methods. Danvers is reported to be where the frontal lobotomy was perfected. According to records, the staff was so overwhelmed that there were many patients that died but were not discovered until days later. Many ghost hunters have snuck onto the property before demolition, but very few captured any evidence. One eyewitness report says that while she lived there as a child, a ghost pulled the sheets off of her bed and then manifested itself as a scowling older woman. Although the number of documented paranormal experiences may be low, there is definitely great potential for ghostly activity. Between 1920 and 1945, the hospital staff committed horrific acts such as lobotomies, cinematic neglect, and restraining children for days at a time. The negative energy there left a large psychic imprint on the dark halls. You may not see a ghost, but you can definitely feel the patient's pain and suffering. In 2006, Danvers was sold to a real estate developer, and most of the buildings were demolished except for the iconic steeple-top administration building, which has been turned into luxury apartments. Guess we'll see what reports arise from the new apartments. There is still one place on the hospital grounds that is open to the public: the Danvers State Hospital Cemetery, located down Hawthorne Hill from the administration building. There are hundreds of patients whose families did not claim their bodies that are buried there. Each of their graves are marked by a number, not a name, but there is a monument listing the patients' names, but nothing on the grave markers. George Island is one of the most visited Boston Harbor islands and is home to the city's most legendary ghost story. According to legends, the Lady in Black still wanders the ground of the islands in her black robes, terrifying those she comes in contact with. Miss Melanie Laner was a devoted wife of a Confederate soldier. After receiving a letter from her husband saying he was a prisoner at Fort Warren on George Island, Melanie made the journey from Georgia to Hull, Massachusetts. One dark, stormy night, Melanie dressed like a man and decided to row from Hull to George Island, carrying her pickaxe and pistol. As agreed, her jailed husband hummed a southern tune to signal her. Melanie made her way ashore and to his cell with a little help from sympathetic soldiers she befriended. While trying to make their escape, they were discovered by a Union officer, and Melanie held him at gunpoint, but the officer gained control of the pistol and it went off, accidentally killing her husband. For her crimes, Melanie was sentenced to death by hanging. Her final request was to be hung in woman's clothing, but unfortunately all that could be found were black robes. She was executed and buried on George's Island in the old robes, where she still wanders today. About 4 miles from Pittsfield is Wizard's Glen, a haunted location in the Berkshires, where the Native American shamans are said to have carried out human sacrifices at the devil's altar. Many of the stories surrounding Wizard's Glen stem from the Puritans' fear of the wilderness and the misunderstanding of the Habamoko, a Native American entity known for making racket. For many of the colonists and settlers, Habamoko is like Satan, making Wizard's Glen an evil place full of black magic and blood rituals. The most famous story is of John Chamberlain, a hunter who had to seek shelter from a storm at Wizard's Glen. While John was trying to get some sleep that night, he suddenly had a vision of demons and Native American warlocks gathering in the forest, when suddenly the devil appeared to accept a sacrifice of a Native American girl. Using his Bible, John scared off the demons, saving the girl's life. Despite John's heroics, legends say the Glen is still cursed today.